When I was younger, I used to really love reading, just any types of books. Any types, like mission stories, biographies, autobiographies, just a whole range of subjects. And one of my favorite pastimes on Sabbath evenings and afternoons was to read mission stories of missionaries that just went out and preached the gospel and reached unreached people. And one of those books was called Dr. Rabbit. This was actually my most beloved childhood book, and before I just go into parts of the story, I'd just like to really recommend it because it's just a powerful book, and I mean, it's an example that we can follow. So the story starts out as this young man who has this calling for missions as a very young man. I mean, when he was just a kid, he told his mom that he wanted to become a missionary. And she encouraged him, and his whole family encouraged him. And he went through training, he became a nurse, and like all missionary stories, he found his sweetheart, got married, and they left shortly after to go to Burma. The plan was to go to Fiji first, but as many times, God had other plans. And so he decided to send them to the unreached Karen spirit worshippers, the people who were called the Karen. And so this is an autobiography by Dr. Rabbit, otherwise known as Eric B. Hare. So I just want to read an excerpt that just captures a little bit of the feel of the story. Eric B. Hare is a really good writer. He incorporates a lot of humor into his books, and so let me just get into this. This is right after he got to Burma, and this is his first patient. Nurse Gibbs smiled a big welcome and pointed to a white doctor's coat hanging on the door. I put it on and looked around. There's perhaps 20 people sitting on the veranda and on the steps, waiting for their turn to be treated, or proudly showing off their bandages and describing the treatment they had already received from the white woman doctor. Some had sore eyes, some had ringworm, some had fever, some had ugly tropical ulcers, and most of the children had worms or stomachache. Here's a man who needs to have a tooth pulled, doctor, said Nurse Gibbs pleasantly. How about you doing it for him? Me? Pull a tooth? Doctor? Of course, I was certainly not a doctor. I only had my nurse's diploma. However, I realized that the Karen word for doctor was used for all professional people. I could have felt very important, except I suddenly realized my nurse's course did not include any dentistry. I began to whisper, but Nurse Gibbs, I've never pulled a tooth in all my... Nurse Gibbs was merciless. Here are the forceps, the oiled cloves, and the lance and elevator if you need them. She placed a small tray in my hands. And here is your patient. There was no way out. After all, was this not what I'd come to Burma to do? All right then, I would do it. I asked the patient to open his mouth and show me the tooth. Fortunately, it was a first molar, easy to get at, and it was very loose. I picked up a small swab and dipped it in the oil of the cloth. I noticed that my hand was trembling. That would never do. Me, a strong young man, trembling? I painted around the tooth with the oil of the cloves and said to myself, Mr. Hare, control yourself, control yourself. But it did no good. The trembling extended to my arms. I picked up the forceps, and by the time I fastened them on the tooth, my knees were knocking together. I broke out with cold perspiration all over. Then suddenly, the tooth was out. I'm not quite sure whether I pulled the tooth out or whether it just fell out with my trembling. And so, this is one of the reasons why I consider this one of my most beloved books, and I would recommend it. Only one downside is that it can go into some graphic